Welcome to the Harmony Hill Legacy Podcast. I'm Todd soon to be lead pastor here on the Hill. Joining me is Pastor John Greene, who has been the senior pastor here for 50 years and soon to step into the role of Pastor Emeritus. Pastor John, thank you for joining us for episode 8.
Wow, it's amazing that this is the 8th one. It's been a great time with you, Todd, and with those who may be joining in. And it's just been good to rehearse a lot of the good things that God has done for us and through us in this whole process of transition. So I really enjoyed these times. It's been really good.
Yeah, me too. So today, what I wanted to ask you about, and I'll do a little setup and then I'll pitch you the question. As many watching would know, we are a church that has been in transition. I alluded to that in the introductions about pastoral changeover, and you've been the senior pastor here for 50 years. And so I'll let you sort of tell this part of the story in just a second, but God put on your heart the desire to transition well. And so we brought in a consultant named Will Heath. His organization is called Sherpa. I know that the two of us, are incredibly grateful for Will and his ministry.
Yes.
And when he came, one of the first concepts he talked to us about was the concept of the incumbent leader having a Pisgah moment, sort of referencing Moses and the Lord telling him on Mount Pisgah that there was a change in leadership coming. And so I'd like, if you would, to just share however you want to start, whether that's what got you to thinking about we need to plan for transition, and then maybe leading into what was your sort of Pisgah moment.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't really know when I first started thinking about the whole concept of transitioning out of senior pastoral leadership. And I know the whole staff knows this. You know it. For me, my walk with the Lord as far as being senior pastor here on the Hill has been 4 or 5 decades. It's just been to stay. You don't leave. You don't run. You stay put. This is where I want you. If you stay, I'll bless you. And so it was just, it's part of my DNA. And I don't know that I ever really thought, okay, so how am I supposed to know when I'm supposed to let go? It was always about staying. And so I can honestly say that, God had to start that in me, or I would not have done it. And one of the ways that God did that was that through our state convention, it became part of the conversation that there are a plethora of senior pastors who are in the baby boomer generation, and so that means they're in the process of aging out. These are guys like myself who are from mid-60s, into their 70s, or probably younger than that, maybe 60 or whatever. But they're getting older, and then I began hearing this thing, and I think it's part of God's work. I began hearing that a lot of them are going to come to the place, unless something changes, that they're going to all of a sudden realize, I can't do this anymore. I need to step down, and the church is not going to be ready for that. And I realized in my heart, because of my incredible love for this place, I can't let that happen. I can't let that happen, to us. And so it's like it got on my screen. And so, like I said, our state convention started talking about that there is this coming tsunami of senior pastors that are going to start retiring. And it's going to kind of pick up speed. And their churches are not going to be ready. There's not going to be somebody in the wings that's ready to step in. And of course, some of these guys may not have the luxury of being able to gradually pass the mantle the torch, the baton, whatever, to somebody, and then maybe go into quote unquote retirement years or the next ministry that God has for them. That's not as intense as being senior pastor. Some of them will kind of die in the saddle, and all of a sudden they're gone. One Sunday they're there, and the next Sunday they're not. And so you've got all those things, and that hit me, and I just realized I've got to do something. So, and we were at the meeting in Grapevine at the SBTC office, and that just became, really, really real to me. And so when I think back, I honestly can't remember, and I probably should have asked the elders. I honestly can't remember if I talked to them first about talking to you, or if I just thought, no, I'm going to ask Todd first, and then I'll talk to the elders. But I remember that when I was just gripped by this, and it became something, inside of me, that my mind immediately went to you. And so anyway, I wound up, if you remember, coming to you. And I remember that day because you were like the proverbial deer caught in the headlights, when I just said, would you be willing to think about following me as senior pastor or lead pastor here on the Hill? And I remember you just kind of looking at me, kind of blinking. And I thought, well, say something, and I know that you...
In fairness, that was a lot.
That was a lot, yeah. I get it. And so, there was just no easy way to kind of slip into that. Right. And so, and so I said, I'd just like for you to take some time, and you said, I'll think about it. So that was good. You weren't saying no. And so I remember, I know we went 1 month, and I think we were going on our second month, and you had not, and of course, in our office setup, well, we pass each other all the time, and Todd was never saying a word. He was never mentioning anything. I thought, well, do I need to remind him, about this, and everything? And then, you came and you just said, I believe that this is what God would have me do. That God is changing the course and the direction of my life, and that I'm supposed to, be a lead pastor. And so that was absolutely huge, that, you would do that. And so I felt like, okay, I've started us going in the right direction. I've got a guy here that I totally believe in, because I would never have asked you if I did not believe that you were blessable, and that God's hand, would be on. I'd seen what God did through you with student ministry and the growth that took place there. And, but, so I started that, and little did I realize how much I was at the front end of this huge emotional journey that I was going to be on. I just knew that for the sake of our people, if I was going to be the leader God wanted me to be, I had to start this. I have to prepare for the future. And so, we started that, and we got that before, the elders, and then started that process of what our steps were going to be. And I don't remember really at what point we had Will come in. In fact, Will was the one that was at the state meeting that I was at, and, just kind of put all this out in front of us. And so we wound up, having Will here. And I'll tell you guys this. So we were in a meeting, and it was all the of us elders and I guess the pastoral staff. I don't know what stage that became.
Yeah, I think it was just the elders.
Maybe it was just the elders at that point,
yeah.
because it wasn't really known that we were looking at you at that point, right?
Yeah.
So this is when he asked me the question about the Pisgah movement. For those of you listening, there was a time when Moses had led Israel. They'd gone through the 40-year wandering in the wilderness. All that whole generation died. And so there's this new generation, the kids of those who had sinned against the Lord, would not go into Canaan, and turned around and wanted to go back to Egypt. And so they all died in the wilderness. And so Moses now had brought them back, and they were back to the edge of Canaan again, back where they had started 40 years ago. And so Moses, he says, Lord, if you will, just let me go over. I want to look. I just want to see the land. And God said, the answer is no. Do not ask me again. But I want you to go up on top of Pisgah, and I'm going to show you the land. And so God would supernaturally show Moses the land, north, south, east, and west. He was able to see the land. And then God made this statement. And the night that Will said it, I became a mess. Because God helped me see what he was doing in my life. I had to have something very significant before I could start to let go. Because for 50 years, for half a century, God's command was, do not let go. Do not leave. Stay put. Stay on your duty, on your job. And so that night, Will said that when God had Moses on Pisgah, that God spoke to Moses and he said this. He said, you have brought the people to here. But he said, now another one will take them in. And that's where I lost it. I just lost it. And it was just like God said to me, you've done everything I wanted you to do. You were obedient, that I could do what I wanted to do and get the church to where she is. And you brought the church to here. Now let go. And I've got another one that's going to take it and go further. And like I said, I was a mess. And it was all that thing of, running the race, crossing the finish line, doing what you're supposed to do. And I know my race is not over, but this particular part of the race is coming to an end. I'm nearing that finish line for this part. And so that Pisgah is a huge, huge thing. And I hope that it will be for maybe some other guys, that they will be led by the Holy Spirit to understand that they're at some point, and this is what you have to understand, at some point, for the good of the church, you're going to have to step down. And that's good for the church. That you step down, you have a transition time, you hand the reins to another guy, and the progression of the church continues. And so that's my joy. And I with joy, I do. And I think you notice I lay the reins in your hands, and I trust it to you, and I do it with a full knowledge that I believe in my heart that my Father's smiling, that this is what He wants me to do. This part of the race is done, and now I find out what that next race. This next race I don't think will be as intense as this first one, but still there's still something for me to do. Or maybe it's the same race and it's just another lap that's going to be different. I don't know. So, when I get that figured out, we can talk about that.
I'll just say that for those that have not had the privileges I have of sitting in all these meetings for probably close to 3 years, that Pastor John, you have through this. And none of us are surprised, but it's been we marvel at it still, that you have shepherded this church with incredible humility and leadership to say exactly what you just said, that what's best for the church is that these things, and that you would care about not just the beginning, but as you've said many times, it's not how you start, but how you finish the race. And we've had incredibly emotional conversations and for a long period of time. And I just want to say in this format, as we've talked even personally, how much I appreciate the way that you have stewarded this transition from Pisgah forward, because that I remember that meeting where it hit you talking about Pisgah. That was an emotional time for all of us, but certainly more so for you. And not to mention the fact that Will came at you with the 1-2 punch of Pisgah, and then you probably don't need to be here for 1 year.
Yeah.
And that's when Pastor John hit the floor, and we said, "Look, he's just a consultant. He doesn't get to tell us what to do."
Yes. Yeah. You need to stay away from church and from worship for a year. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
And so we have negotiated a different arrangement than that, but yeah, that was a big night for sure. Now, as we've gone through from Pisgah, again, at the time of this recording, we are 1 month from the actual conclusion of the overlap, the conclusion of the transition, where we will both settle into new roles at the end of this month. And you are getting ready to preach, at least as the senior pastor, the last 3 sermons series, or the last 3 sermons. What have been some of the emotions that have come about over the course from Pisgah to now? Again, we're talking a couple of years. It's not just months, but as this has become more of a reality, what are some of the emotions that you've had to embrace or walk through?
I'm very grateful that one emotion that I have not had even an inkling is doubting what we've done. I've been totally settled in that. You in this position, the work that the elders have done, the whole idea of, this being my last year, and we've gradually, initially our plan was that I would be in this position until August of this year. And so I think it really just God working inside of me that it wasn't necessary, what we had, the transition, I think the how our people felt about you, the total acceptance of you being lead shepherd here, it didn't necessitate that kind of overlap. And so we shortened it back to May. And so my last Sunday was going to be, I think, the first Sunday in Jude or the last Sunday in May or whatever. And I was like, no, I don't think we even do that. But that was a gradual process. And so now we got it back. It's February. And we felt good about that. I really feel like this is the right time. And so that part has been a surprise to me. Just that, I can let go, and I'm okay with that. It has been a roller coaster at times, and I realize, you can't. Your emotions are what they are, and you can't talk yourself out of it. And so I've definitely gone through. I've been in a cycle of grief, and I think just the passage of something that's been part of my life, for 50 years, and then at the same time, I've literally been on my face thanking God for what we have with you, with the leadership team, and with the elders. I'm so grateful for all that, the acceptance of our people, the fact that people, the city knows I'm right. Well, how's retirement? Well, no, it hadn't happened yet, and so and besides that, I'm not retiring. I'm just going into another ministry, and so all of that has been good, and I realize I've got to go through that because it is a life-changing experience. And so I just kind of roll with it. And I've appreciated you guys because y'all have said, look, we don't expect you to be here every day, all the time. And honestly, there's been those times when it's been good for me just to be at home and be still, and not be out, because I had maybe a couple of tough hours where I just needed to work through things.
Mm.
And so it's not a bad thing.
Mhm.
It's just, it's change,
Mm.
and learning that it's good, but it's different. And I've got to fit into new clothes. And but I'm ready to do that. And I'm looking forward to that. But I definitely it has been an emotional roller coaster, for me, very much.
I appreciate your vulnerability to answer that question because I think that's helpful for anybody that goes through change and maybe even for some of our church members who are watching this podcast or listening to it to understand, okay, it's okay that like the listener is had seasons of grief because maybe you've been their pastor for 45 years or 30 years or even a decade and they're the only pastor they've ever known. And so it's okay to have that mixture of both grief and joy
Yeah.
and hope about the future.
Yeah.
And I think that's a healthy thing. And so I appreciate you being willing to just sort of pull the curtain back a little bit to share that. Has there been anything, and maybe you've already discussed it in what you just shared, but has there been anything that God has taught you from the moment of, say, Pisgah to now that maybe you weren't expecting that He would teach you, or that you're thankful that even in this period of transition and change that He
Well,
showed Himself?
I am definitely, I'm having the opportunity to trust God, to trust my Father in fresh ways, um, to, to trust that, that first of all, I do rejoice that I have that sense that God says you've done what I wanted you to do,
Mm,
right? And so I have that, but then there's also the thing that I'm having to trust Him that just like He made a way for me when I came here, and there was so much I didn't know, that there's still a large part of my future that's kind of cloudy.
mm,
Um, and people say, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I really wish you wouldn't ask that, but because there's a lot that I don't know. I don't. But I just know that as long as I'm breathing, as long as I'm here, as long as my health is relatively good, that God, um, my calling is still in effect.
mm.
Um, and I wanna be doing that. And so I'm having to learn, Todd. I'm having to learn to trust my Father in ways that I haven't had to before. It's just, um, it's different. And just figuring out, what is John Greene going to look like? What's ministerial life going to be like for John? Um, after the 50 years
Mm.
has been completed. Um, and so I'm getting to trust Him afresh in that. And so it's almost like I'm starting
Hmm.
over in some ways, and God was so faithful in 1972 when I was a blank sheet.
Hmm.
I was a blank sheet. I was. And and I just look back and I see how God led, and I know He'll be faithful in all that. And so yeah, I probably the biggest thing is I'm trusting Him again. I'm trusting Him one day at a time. Uh, and all I can see right now is, the third Sunday of February, where I officially step aside,
Mm.
uh, and you become lead pastor, and I'm pastor emeritus. And then all I know is that, Catherine and I will have our offices in another place on campus. We'll work however often we're going to work and do ministry. And we're going to do what God puts in front of us to do. And that He'll give us opportunity to impact lives.
Mhm.
and encourage people. Uh, and I hope that I can still be a tool to draw people to the hill,
Mm.
as well as and especially to the Lord.
Right.
Right. So
Amen. Well, I certainly resonate and appreciate uh, what you just shared with us because I too am sort of at a
yeah,
change juncture and trusting the Lord for the day by day and what's next. And so I know it's different, but it's similar. And I'm
it
also
is.
very thankful that one of the people uh, that you'll be able to encourage is me. And I'm thankful for the
Amen, bro.
relationship that we have and that you've given me the privilege of knowing where your home address is if I need to come sit in your living
There
room
you
and
go.
seek
Yes.
counsel or prayer. And
Amen.
so I definitely appreciate that. And again, Pastor John, I cannot thank you enough for entrusting to me. I know it's through the Lord and it's a spiritual exercise, but for the way that you have not only pointed me to the position, but that you have put your influence and your hand of blessing and behind me. And I have no doubt that that is a large part of why the church um, has been able to be as healthy and unified through this season of transition as we have. And
Amen.
so thank you, brother.
Amen. You bet, bro.
Whew, that was a good one. I appreciate you watching this episode of the Legacy Podcast here on the Hill. And we hope that we'll see you on the Hill. And if you watch this, I hope you'll if you have avenue to do so, would you send Pastor John an encouragement for the way that he's led for 50 years and through this transition? I know that would mean a lot in this next season of his life. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, share, drop a review. Let people know about it so that we can grow the audience so that they can hear about what God's been doing in Pastor John and here on the Hill over the last 50 years. We'd also love to have you come and join us for in-person worship on the Hill.